So if I told you Georgia would be about a 4-point favorite over Alabama next year, would you believe me? It's pretty close to that. Now, that's what the projections are for SP Plus from Bill Conley over at ESPN. That would have to be like on a neutral field. That would mean essentially in Tuscaloosa, which we know is not going to happen. Georgia it would be about a pick'em game, and in Athens it would be about a touchdown. We know that's not going to happen because they're not scheduled to play each other. So on a neutral field, heading into the season, Georgia would be about a 4 point, could be five. A little bit depends, obviously as time goes on. I think that's about right. I mean, I think that might be slightly low. I might say it might be five for Georgia. You do have both teams are in a are transitioning, frankly, into different quarterbacks, different coordinators. Georgia of the four coordinators, five of the four coordinator positions at the two schools, three of them are gone. So Bama's replacing both, and Georgia obviously has replaced Todd Monken with Mike Bobo. So when you think about it, Alabama a season ago, and you cannot predicate everything on what happened last year. I mean, you can't. But it's the most recent data that we've got. Alabama last year, it wasn't just that they had the quote four tight games, right? I mean, if I hear any more about how Alabama lost two games by a combined 4 points, well, they won against Texas and Texas A&M on the last play of the game. So, if you want to say that they could be undefeated, they could also be 8-4. So let's not get too carried away with that whole deal. Like for instance, Georgia could have been 11-1, but they couldn't have been 10-2. I mean, like there was nobody they played. We talk about this in double. Hey, listen, by the way, if you're just watching this for the first time, if you buy double dogs, you get confetti from Georgia's national championship. Um, Order it today and you get it. But there was no game that Georgia played last year outside of Missouri, where we talk about in the book. Outside of Missouri, look at this picture, golly. Um, and the Ohio State game, there were no games Georgia was going to lose. Yeah, they were killing everybody. Alabama, you really couldn't say that. And excuse me. Speaking of the Missouri game, when oh my God, that place. We were out there, and I'm getting ready for the Mizzou game, right? And it's real late at night for us. It felt real late. They didn't kick that thing off until 8 Eastern. That was a nightmare. That was a nightmare trip. Ryan Curley can back me up on that deal. But we're watching Alabama Arkansas, and Bryce Young gets hurt, and Alabama suddenly gets in kind of a fight with Arkansas. If that is the Alabama that is in 2022, excuse me, in 2023, Georgia's not going to be a 5 point favorite. They're going to be like an 8 or 9 point favorite. And there's just, I don't know where Alabama's really at with quarterback. And I'm not going to act like I do. I don't know. If it's the young man that's in there, number four, I think it is, it's not going to work in a way that it did this past year. Now, I'm just sitting here, taking turds all over Alabama. Georgia's got question marks too. I think the difference is for Georgia, what I would say is you're replacing a quarterback who has won you two national championships as a starter with a guy who's been on campus for what will be his fourth year. You are coming back to the season with an offensive line that has returning 4 out of 5 guys that started the national championship football game and the Peach Bowl. So you're starting with really good there. But both these programs are going to lose good players. I mean, Alabama loses basically its whole backfield, okay? And those were their best two playmakers. Georgia's got to deal with the loss of Kenny McIntosh. I mean, that matters. When you look at the board and you're losing Kenny McIntosh, you're losing A.D. Mitchell, You're losing Darnell Washington. Those losses matter. Those losses matter. Just straight up, and it's terrible. You lost Devin Willock. He would be a guy that was probably starting, but he passed away, obviously tragically. So there are, there are issues with Georgia too, no doubt. You do not have A.D. Mitchell, as I said. Blaylock has left. Um, but you do return so many guys. You lose Jalen Carter. Basically, the rest of the defense returns. Actually, the defensive line, excuse me. So the power that Georgia comes into the season with is essentially the same as you left with, right? I mean, Georgia essentially. You're losing AD. You're losing Stetson. These are things that matter, and people, it can't be. And so I said this about Trevor Lawrence. It can't be that you lost Trevor Lawrence and like it's all good, right? Like there's problems with losing really good quarterbacks. Ohio State didn't really have that issue. They lost Justin and they went straight into CJ Stroud. Is that what's going to happen? Well, in Alabama, Alabama lost Jalen to Tua, then lost Tua to Mac, and then lost Mac to CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's the best one. Excuse me. Bryce Young's the best one. Bryce Young's the best quarterback they've had. I'm not hating the other guys. If I'm starting an NFL friend, if I'm starting a college team, I'm definitely taking Bryce Young over those guys. Now, there's a reason he didn't start over Mac Jones, but that doesn't mean he's not the better player at the end of the day. He was. He was the better player. He didn't win the national championship. He won the Heisman Trophy, which sort of proves my point, I guess. Mac Jones did not. I would take him. You got to replace him. There is no certain. The other thing about Alabama's situation, there is no certain guy. It doesn't seem like to me, because when Mac Jones came in, he looked a little jumpy when they played against Auburn. Okay, in 19. Well, that all settled down. And that guy was a freak in 20. Is that what's going to happen in 23 for Alabama? I don't think so. Doesn't seem like it. And then if you're the Dogs, is Carson Beck, if he's the guy, and my suspicion is Carson Beck will be the guy, but we'll see. But if Carson's the guy, is it going to be this guy right here? Is it going to be the guy that we really saw play well when he got in there? That matters. Like all this stuff matters. And when you start talking about a 4 to 5 point line, I think it's right. I think it's right. And I think the other thing too is, we start looking at some of these other lines. I'm going to talk about other teams in the future. Like Georgia on a neutral field would be at least an 11 point, it's about a 12-point favorite over Clemson, Utah, Florida State, and about a 10 and a little bit favorite over USC, Southern Cal. That's a lot of points, man. That's a lot of points. And we're going to see from the casinos soon what what they're willing to take money on. Those come out in what, like middle to one problem here, y'all, is, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be a big thing in the spring section. A lot of these programs, like Georgia this second, is somewhere around 80, 91, 92 scholarship guys. That includes COVID stuff. So there's a couple of changes that are still going to come at Georgia. Those guys are going to transfer out. Will there be other people that transfer in? So the spring is going to be less volatile, in my opinion. So a lot of this stuff is locked in terms of, who's Georgia bringing back. Like there's not going to be another quarterback that Georgia brings in. And I mean, Alabama, I don't think they're bringing another quarterback. Nick has shown over time that he has the ability to win with any type of quarterback. Blake Sims, in a way, at Alabama, was before his time. In a way, not a lot of years, but he was before his time. He was a radical departure, I would say, because of his athleticism, his ability to run. Blake Sims was a pretty big departure from what Bama had done before that. And I mean, certainly with Jake Coker. Jake Coker was a good athlete. He was not Blake Sims. He was not Jalen Hurts. So these guys that are in there now, Nick has shown he can win with any kind of quarterback. I mean, to go from Jalen, who was a mobile guy, to Tua, who, or I mean, I'm not saying Tua's mobile, and certainly not Mac Jones. Uh, those guys were not at all mobile compared to what Jalen was. Nick has shown he can do it. So that's the question. Can Georgia, I mean, I think it's right. I think these are right. But can Georgia continue to progress? Can Alabama continue well, can Alabama stop regression? Let's be frank. Now, you won the national championship in 20. You lost in the national championship game in 21. You won the league, though. And then this past year, you didn't do either of those things. So it's not just can they progress? They got to stop the recession, the regression. That's the challenge in Alabama right now.